Hello, in this video I'm going to talk about how to align and scale your maps to the grid in Roll20. So the first method that I'm going to show you is the easy method, or I call it kind of the cheat method. Right? We're not going to be working this. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and start a new tab, and we're going to pull out the map that we're going to work on. We're going to make sure we're on the map background layer, drag out the map that we want. I'm just going to use this tavern map. All right, and throw it up here. Now, one thing you notice about this map is you can see by the blue line that along the top edge there's a little extra space along it, and then we have a kind of a border that's part of the map a bit, but not really part of these grids, right? So lining it up is going to be a little extra. So the first thing that I usually do when I'm trying to line up the maps, just so I can get a better idea of where the grid in Roll20 is and where the grid on the map is I'm going to come into the page settings, and I'm going to change the grid to a bright color. Either a lot of times I'll use red, but since this has a lot of browns, it doesn't, the reds can kind of blend in with that. I could use yellow or pink. Pink is going to stand out quite a bit, and I'm going to, especially this fuchsia type of pink, I'm going to turn the opacity up as far as we can. The other thing, I default my background to black. That's a preference. By default in Roll20 it's white, but I change my game settings typically to black. I just like it better for most maps, but that's a preference. So if that's different for you, that's why. So I'm going to hit OK. And so now we can see these pink lines are the Roll20 lines, and the gray lines, and they actually look kind of like yellow up here because of the light, and gray down here. So it looks like whoever made this map, and I will link the source where I found this map in the comments. But so you see that it doesn't quite line up. So the first thing you can try to do is, and I'm going to actually make it a little bit smaller, but I'm going to try to line up. I'm going to hold down the Alt key. And what that does is if I move this map, it's going to snap to the grid. So if I set it right there in the middle, it's just going to snap to one way or the other, right? You can't. So if you hold down the Alt key while you drag the map, it prevents it from just automatically snapping to the grid. So I'm going to look up here in this corner, and we'll see that I've lined up this here, but it's not quite lining up. All right. So the easy way to deal with this is to just make the map. The easiest way is first go in here into the page settings, and we're going to just uncheck this grid enabled. So we're going to disable the grid completely, right? So now I can just drag this up here, just make this whatever dimensions. Usually you want to do this on the side so it keeps the ratio, and so it keeps that map, right? So now we have the map. There's no grid, but the image of the map has a grid that you can use. So I'm going to come over here, and I have a character that I can drag out. Now see, when I drag it out, depending on what size you made your map, the characters default to 70 by 70. So this is obviously going to be bigger than that. You could stretch this out. You could resize the token, and that'll work. But what I'm going to recommend doing, I'm going to hit Control Z there, is I'm going to recommend leaving the token out there, because I know that this token, if you go into Advanced, Set Dimensions, is going to be 70 by 70 pixels. Now, why we want to kind of keep that is Roll20's grid default is 70 by 70. And I'll show you why that comes into play in a second. So I'm going to just kind of minimize it until that fits as close as possible. And still, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can kind of see that it's still a little bit off. If you line up those lines. So I'll make it a little bit smaller. See if those lines line up, and then, they're a little bit more. There we go. Now this is why this pays off. Okay, so like I said, Roll20, just a tiny bit more. Roll20 assumes that a 5-foot grid is 70 pixels. So one of the downsides to using no grid is if you don't do this, your measurement tool is going to be off. Now, the measurement tool default is the snap to center. So like say, you're going to measure that's 10 feet. It's still off a little bit, right? So even if you say no snapping or snap to corner, there's no corners to snap to, right? It's not snapping to anything. So snap to center or no snapping is the way to go. So by sizing your grid to match as closely as possible to the 70 by 70 thing, I mean it's still a little off, but it's fairly close. If you are playing the game and you need to measure something, you can usually it's from center to center, so that's 20 feet. So it's close. Let's go another 25, 30, 35, 40. It's close, right? So you have somewhat of an accuracy with that. Now, say I didn't do that. Say I said, okay, I want this map to be big. I want the details to really kind of pop out. I want to have to zoom in to see these details. So I'm going to zoom this in bigger. Then what I have to do, I mean, you could leave this token this way. It doesn't really matter. But, you can say, okay, well, and then I'll just resize my tokens so they fit in the squares. Right, I'll resize this player token so it fits in a square. Now what happens is if you use this grid, see that's only 10 feet. It's off by 5 feet. Another 10 feet, it's off by 10 feet. So the farther out you go, the worse it's going to get because that ruler is assuming that 70 pixels equals 5 feet. So like you go to this edge, it's assuming 5 feet is not even there. So that's why that's why you'd want to take a little bit of time. Now, if you don't ever use the ruler and that's not important to you or your players, you don't have to do that. But this is the easy way to do it. The only downside is you can move your token anywhere. They don't have to put it in. They don't have to put it in the inside the grid if they don't want to. They can say, "Oh, I'm going to sit right here at this chair," and that's kind of cross grids, or I'm gonna sit at this chair or at this bar stool, right? So they can move it wherever they want, and you can kind of deal with that however you deem fit when you're running your game. So that is the easy way. The next way we're going to talk about is a couple other things. So we want to use the grid now, right? So we want to I can come in here and delete this map. There's nothing on that one. So come in here, we're going to re-enable the grid. All right, so now we want to take a look at some map files, right? So I got a couple maps here. This one here is a good example. I'm going to just say edit this and paint, right? And we're going to take a look at it. Now, when you pick a map file, either downloading it online or purchasing it, one thing you want to do is you want to try to buy maps. One, the higher res, the better. And you also would like, if you can find maps that say they're made for Roll20, those ones are perfect because they are actually measured out really well. So this one's a good map if we take a look at it here. It's fairly high res. The lines are nice and the lines for the squares are nice and clear for the most part where there are lines. There's no extra padding around the map. It's the squares, the tiles, you know, however you want to call it. They go from edge to edge, right? So I know because the person who created this map or named it, they named it the name and then 19 by 17. Now this map I got from DM's Guild, and for the map pack, and it's a bundle for Waterdeep Dragon Heist. I'll link that in the credit in the YouTube in the comments below. So if you are interested in purchasing it, you can contact them or buy the bundle. So we know that this is 17 or 19 wide by 17 deep. We know that there's no extra edges. There's nothing really that we need to do. This is a great map. This is a great, candidate for using in Roll20. So what I'm going to do is I already have this map in here, and again I have it under maps, and I have it under my city subfolder and Waterdeep because it was part of my Waterdeep campaign. So and I'm going to find it here. One suggestion I would maybe make is you could rename this here, and here you can name it whatever you want. Name it 19 by 17, so you know. So here I'm gonna come in here, edit this, and I could make it 19 by 17, but I'm actually gonna make it. I'm gonna add 2 to each side, so 19. So it's gonna be 21 wide. Instead of 17, it's gonna be 19 wide. And again, I'm still going to leave this color pink, just for now, that while I'm making it up. So I named it 2, so I know that it's going to have both on the width here. It's going to be 2 wider, so it can go that way, and it's going to be 2 taller, so I can go here. Now you can go to the edges if you want, but while I'm lining it up, I like to have that buffer around it. Right? So and then you can see we knew the exact number of squares. Everything matches up really nice. So I can come in here, I can change the color back to like a light gray or even a medium dark gray, but turn the opacity down and you barely see it. But if you bring a token into here, if you bring a character into here, they're going to snap to the grid and they're going to snap right in those squares, and it works well. Um, it also works well. Another reason for aligning up your grid properly is if you do use dynamic lighting. A lot of the dynamic lighting or fog of war will go by the grid. So having it line up with the grid makes a huge difference. So you don't have things that reveal too far out or don't show enough. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So that's an easy one, right? That's an easy map. It's a great candidate because it's, high res, decently high res, clear quality, and it's, we know the dimensions. All right, so that map worked out great, but let's say we have another map. I have another map here that I'm going to upload. This is actually wrong. All right, I had previously counted it, so I know, but we're going to open this up in Paint. Okay, so this is a map that I got by Cobalt Press in the Book of Layers, and I will link that below if you were interested in purchasing that. It's a book with adventures with the maps in them, and it's a 2-level map. But one of the issues, it's high quality and everything, but one of the issues that I had when I tried to import this previously is if you look along the top, we're zoomed all the way up here. There's a little extra padding, like the squares come here. There's like a little bit extra that was cut off, and If we scroll over to the right side, it's the same thing. So on the top and on the right side, there's a little bit of extra space. Now, one thing I could do is use Paint or any other kind of imaging editing software and crop that out. Crop it out from this point and on to the rest of the thing and just cut out that extra one and import it. But if you have one where you don't want to crop it out or you don't want to deal with that or like that tavern one that I had earlier where it didn't quite match up, there's another way around that, and I'll show you that here. But one of the things we want to know is how many squares is the width and how many squares on the height. So one of the things I do, I just set my brush, go a little bit thick, and I'm going to count, right? So, and I'm going to just start at every other one. So 2, and I'm just going to put an X. You could put the number 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and see, just in case, like, oh, I lose my place, because if I'm zoomed in, you know what I mean, I can just go back and go, okay, yeah, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, and then that's 24. 24 wide. So then I'm going to go down, and I'm going to start at 2, 4, 34, and 36. So we know it's 24 by 36. Now, I already saved that name 24 by 36, so I'm going to go ahead. So now we know if you had a map that you downloaded or whatever and you didn't have the dimensions, that's a quick and easy way to do it for me. I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to say don't save because I don't want to keep that writing on there. And then I'm going to drag this into Roll20. And again, we're operating on the map layer already, so it should pull it in. One of the things I noticed about the map layer, typically when you drag a file onto the map layers out, it's fairly big. It doesn't make it 1 square by 1 square. It makes it a little easier to work with. But we're going to come in here, and again, I'm going to make this grid pink. We know that the dimensions was 24 by 36, so I'm going to actually make it 26 by 38. Just add that buffer on it, right? So now if we just do it the same way we did it the other map, right, we can drag this down, snap it to that grid, and it's fairly lined up, right? So, but if we look, kind of zoom in, we can see, I don't know if I turn the opacity up on it for the pink, right? So we can see as we go sideways, we're what I call drifting, right? To where the line here, it starts to drift a little off and a little off. And the longer you go, and this one's not too bad, you could possibly use it and not have any major issues, just as is. You know what I mean? You're going to have a tiny bit of drift, but if you're a perfectionist, what you want to do is like come over to the beginning of it. Usually I start at the upper corner, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to hold the Alt key down, and I'm going to drag that up to where that corner there, zoom in as much as we can, so zoom in and then go to the up to this corner. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to, these 2 lines I want to put right there. So now we can kind of go and look vertically and see, we start seeing the lines getting separated from the pink lines, right? And the longer we go, the worse it gets. Now, in this case, we're seeing that the black lines start happening before. So this square is a little bit too smaller, which so we know that that needs to go. Um, so if it's before if it's before the line, we know that the map needs to be moved that way. If we start seeing the lines on this side, like if we start seeing them over here and then drifting farther and farther apart on this side, we know that the map needs to be resized that way. So, but because they're on this side and we know that they needs to be drug a little bit wider, we're going to come over here. You got to go down to the middle of the map to where you see the square, and then holding Alt, drag it out. Now, if I don't hold Alt, it's just going to snap back. Or to snap to the next one over here, and it's too big. So see, this is too big, and like I was saying before, if we come back to the beginning they line up, but we start seeing that line on this side, and they get wider and wider. So we know, just that's what it looks like, right? So when you're trying to do it, start at the top left and go sideways, go to the right and see which way this needs to be made. So again, holding Alt, put it on that line. So now if we come to the top, and we need to do that to the top because it snapped it. Actually, we just need to hold Alt and move it up. Go back over here. That's pretty good, but not perfect. And we're trying for perfect, right? That's the goal. So, now we get the vertical matching up. So now let's look at the horizontal, right? We'll start at the top left, and we'll work our way down. And we start, and it's looking pretty good. I'm starting to see a little bit of drift upwards, right? So like if anything, I'm seeing it before, which means it needs to go downwards. Again, I see a little bit more. And then the farther down we go, the farther upwards that line's going to get. So again, we want to come into the middle here because we have to grab this square and just hold Alt and pull down. And actually, on this one, I think just snapping it to the grid, Control Z to undo my mistake because I think I unsnapped it up here. Let's take a look. Yeah. So, but yeah, so now it's lining up with this. So now we can go all the way up again and just make sure. Sometimes it's a little bit back and forth, but if you start from the upper right and work your way, you can work down. You can work the horizontal first if you want, or the vertical. It doesn't matter. Usually you can eyeball it and see which one's worse and get that one first. So that's how we did that, right? So it has a little bit of extra, and now this map is matches up perfectly. You know, I don't see any major flaws with that. Now again, this is a pretty high quality map. The lines were clear, but we had that issue of extra space. Now let's take a look at a map here that is even harder, right? So this map here, we can see we can see, I'm going to open it up in Paint just so we can take a look at it, right? So first thing I notice here, down here, it's the resolution's fairly low, 600 by 700 pixels. It's a very small map. It's also a JPEG, not a PNG file. So I know that the resolution is not going to be the best. The other issue is all of the edges are very ununiform, right? Also, when we have so much stuff in the middle, like it's going to be really hard. It'd be possible, but it'd be time consuming to try to count how many are down to the edge and how many are across, right? So, and that probably wouldn't even help us that much anyways. So, we're not even going to try that because in this kind of a map, it's not going to be super worth it. But this is going to be like one of the more challenging ones in Roll20. So we're going to bring it in here. All right. So I'm going to first put it up here. And looking at the map, we can tell that it's almost twice as long as it is wide. So I'm just going to make a guess. And I'll say 40, maybe 2/3, 40 and 60. Right. And again, I'm going to keep the pink. We could go with red on this one. I wouldn't do yellow because it's a lot of tans or whatever, so we'll go red just to change it up a little bit. All right, so I'll say OK. I'm going to zoom out and just stretch it out a bit. So again, I'm going to start up here in the upper left-hand corner. So I'm going to look at this first, kind of zoom in a little bit. I'm going to look at this first square is the lines right here. This one's also interesting because we have these squares, right? We have this square here, but then there's also like little faint lines in the middle, which kind of, add a little bit to the, you know, to the trouble. So, yeah, I'm going to focus on this one here. I'm going to try to line that up. Now, this time let's work vertically, or let's work vertically or horizontally first. Right. So if we look here, this first square starts there, then it goes up. It's even closer, even more. So we know that the map has to be pulled further down. So we're going to go down. And for this, you can zoom out if you want. But there's so much lines here when you zoom out. It could be more. So I'm just going to pull it till. So what you want to try to do, and so like I said, it's further down than because it's so small at that point. So basically what I'm trying to do here is you see let me go back up to the top because I think it might have got knocked off. Yep. So you got to be careful when you're dragging. If you're not holding Alt, it will snap it back to the grid and then unalign it at the top. So this one's not too bad, but again, it's still got that drift, right? So when we come down to the bottom, what we're trying to do, what we're looking at, I didn't mean to do that. What we're looking at is like, so we have this square here, right? We want to, when we pull this down, we want that square to kind of go into the, from this one, we want to pull it down into this one and see if it matches up better. So see if we pull, and I think, so we're seeing those, we're just looking at the, we're not looking at the sideways lines, we're just looking at the up and down lines. These are not bad, but let's just double check up here. Got to move it back up. So see, the vertical lines seem okay. They're starting to drift just a tiny bit again. So maybe one more, holding down Alt. Never forget to hold down Alt. I think I did more than one. All right, so let's go up here and look down. And it could be annoying because the vertical lines, like your eyes, your brain knows that they're off, but we're just looking at the horizontal lines for now. Right, so they are looking fairly good at this point, right? So now we want to look at the vertical. So again, we start here and we see that, like if we look on this row, we see that this line starts there, That line starts there, so we know that it's got to go that way. So we're going to come over here. And again, what I'm going to watch for, as I drag this, as I pull this way, I'm going to see this square, and I'm going to move it just to the next square and try to line it up. And then if they're not lining up good, if they're not wide enough, I'm going to just keep pulling it to this square, to where this square fits in. After 2 or 3, see if it fits, and then go back and check, right? So holding Alt, pull it over. See, we still got a little bit. It's getting closer, but probably one more. And I think I messed up. And I did. So when you see that whole map shift like that, just stop and come back up at the top. So I got that centered again, and now we're looking, and it's still going. Still got that drift, but it's getting better. So it's just a little bit of pull it. And the more you do this, the faster you can get at it, because you'll just kind of know. So see, now I'm just going to do that, and we're going to take a look at it, right? So we're going to start here, but now we start seeing that the drift is the other way, so we know we went too far. See, the lines start on the other side. Oh, I messed it up again. So I'm just going to pull it down right there. But still, the drift is on the other side, which is not as bad. So you got to keep holding the Alt key until you let it go. Okay, I think that right there is probably pretty good. Now the problem with this image too, like I said, it's low resolution, so these lines in here are fuzzy, right? They're a little bit fuzzy. Now, so they're hard to line up. They're not uniform. They're not crisp like the other ones were, so that can cause a little bit of problems. And there's other little lines coming through it, so you're looking through the main squares. But I think we got it. So that was a harder map, right? And it just took a little bit of time and patience, and I see a little bit of drift here down at the bottom. And again, that's workable. That's playable 100%. There's no squares where it's going to be so off that nobody's going to notice it. And then sometimes that's the best you can get for these lower resolution maps, right? Um, so then now, the other thing you could do is you could edit the page and take this extra squares off. That might help your performance if you have a lot of maps. And on this map, this is one of the ones I'm going to choose to do white, because then it doesn't stand out as much, right? So there you go. I hope that helps. I hope it helps you get maps more aligned to the grid easier in Roll20. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. Thank you.